Anomaly Chronicles, Book 1, The Probable Duck, Prologue, in which the universe is held together with string, and not very good string at that. It is a truth universally acknowledged by anyone who has ever tried to balance an interplanar rift, mend a broken wand, or repair a cracked kettle, that the universe is held together by string. Not noble rope, not enchanted thread, not even twine of reasonable quality. Just string. The sort of string you find knotted around a box in your grandmother's attic, suspiciously sticky and smelling faintly of cabbage. Our company of heroes, a generous word, but let's not quibble. Gale, Astarion, Karlach, Shadowheart, Lae'zel, Wyll, Withers, and one Vesta were not, in fact, looking for the string of creation. They were looking for a tavern. Vesta deserves an explanation. Not that she has one. She occasionally said things that didn't belong. Alt-tab out of this nightmare, for example, or somebody just walked across my keyboard, which is a bizarre thing to say if no one present knows what either a keyboard or a walk is supposed to mean in that context. Sometimes she did things she couldn't explain, putting her mug down in mid-air and expecting it to stay there, or attempting to save the game by staring meaningfully into space. The others had learned to cope. Shadowheart quietly judged, Lae'zel loudly judged. Karlach laughed. Astarion pretended to be above it all, while secretly keeping a tally of her weirdest phrases. Gale theorized at length about cross-planar consciousness bleed, and Wyll, ever the gentleman, smiled politely, as though he understood everything she was saying, which of course he didn't. As for Withers, sometimes he simply looked at her, as though he could see the invisible strings that tugged her along, and then, infuriatingly, said nothing. And so it was that this unlikely fellowship wandered into the place where reality itself had begun to unravel. Gale was lecturing a squirrel on entropy. Karlach was humming cheerfully under the weight of everyone's luggage. Astarion was practicing disdain in the reflective surface of his dagger. Shadowheart was muttering about the futility of it all. Lae'zel was sharpening her sword with intent. Wyll was preparing a rousing speech no one had asked for, and Vesta had just loudly announced, "Okay, I swear that wasn't me. My cat just hit the space bar." The universe shuddered, the string frayed, and thus the story began. Chapter 1. The tavern that shouldn't exist, but does, due to accounting errors in reality. Taverns are meant to be reliable things. You can count on a tavern to provide beer of questionable quality, floors of questionable stickiness, and a bard of questionable talent. What you cannot usually count on is a tavern sitting at the corner of two roads that do not, technically speaking, intersect. This tavern did. The sign outside read, "The Probable Duck." Nobody could quite agree on whether the duck in question existed or not, but everyone agreed it was highly likely. The paint was peeling, the door was crooked, and, by rights, the building shouldn't have been there at all. According to every map Gale possessed, and he had several, annotated with footnotes, ink smudges, and passive-aggressive comments about other scholars, this exact spot should have been an empty crossroads, possibly a swamp, certainly not a tavern. Naturally, this was where the party arrived. "Ah!" Wyll exclaimed, puffing out his chest. "A tavern, where tales are forged, destinies entwined, and heroes are sung into legend." Vesta tripped over a rock and muttered, "Great, I'll just Control-Z that." Nobody knew what that meant, not even Vesta. Karlach laughed so hard she nearly dropped the entire pile of luggage she was carrying. "Gods, I love it when you say weird things." Astarion narrowed his eyes at the sign. "The Probable Duck? Sounds more like a bad bet than a place to drink. We're going to walk in there and be served ale by a goose, I just know it." Lae'zel frowned. "What is a duck? Is it edible? Or is it one of your peculiar surface metaphors?" "Both," Vesta said automatically. She didn't know why. Somewhere, in a realm she couldn't name, a player at a keyboard had just Googled, "Are ducks edible?" And the answer had bled through. Withers shuffled along behind them and said nothing, which of course was the most ominous response of all. Gale, meanwhile, was vibrating with academic curiosity. An impossible tavern, an architectural paradox. Do you realize what this means? This building exists outside the conventional rules of geography and cartography. I must investigate its load-bearing enchantments immediately. You mean drink, Astarion said. I mean study, Gale replied primly, which, coincidentally, does require a pint or two for context. The tavern door swung open before they touched it. A blast of warm, beer-scented air rushed out, along with the faint sound of a lute being strangled by someone who thought they were playing it. Inside, voices murmured, mugs clinked, and reality itself hiccuped slightly, as though the world couldn't quite keep up with the paperwork. Vesta stepped forward first, not because she was brave, but because in another reality a distracted hand had accidentally pressed the W key. The others followed. Wyll posed dramatically in the doorway until Karlach dragged him inside by the collar. Shadowheart sighed. Lae'zel muttered something about surface world idiocy. Withers wrote something in his notebook, and thus the party entered the Probable Duck, where the drinks were questionable, the laws of physics were negotiable, and destiny had clearly taken the night off. Chapter 2. The bartender who definitely shouldn't talk but does anyway. The inside of the Probable Duck looked like every tavern you've ever seen in a painting, a dream, or a hastily written adventure module. Wooden beams groaned overhead, the air was thick with pipe smoke and stew, and the floor had achieved the rare alchemical state of being both sticky and slippery at the same time. At the far end of the room, behind the bar, stood the bartender. This was not unusual. What was unusual was that the bartender was clearly the tavern itself. He was made of wood. Not in the usual rugged bark-skinned druid sense, but in the literal. His shoulders were table legs and his head was a drawer-front sense. His beard was sawdust. His eyes were little brass knobs, and when he spoke his voice came with the faint creak of hinges. "Welcome to the Probable Duck," he intoned. "I am... management." "See?" Astarion whispered, looking smug. "I told you." "Goose, duck, same thing, it's all poultry with pretensions." "Correction," the bartender said without moving his mouth, which was difficult as he didn't technically have one. "I am not a goose. I am not a duck. I am the manifestation of administrative oversight errors in the grand fabric of existence. Would you like a drink?" Everyone turned to Gale, who was scribbling furiously in his notebook. "Fascinating," Gale muttered. "A living contradiction of architecture and employment law. Tell me, are you bound to the premises, or can you file for annual leave?" "Drinks are 2 coppers," the bartender said, ignoring him. Karlach slapped a gold piece on the counter. "A round for everyone, and another for me while you're at it." The bartender absorbed the coin directly into his wooden arm. The floor gave a satisfied rumble, as though it had just balanced a ledger. Wyll cleared his throat dramatically. "Friends, we must be cautious. Places like this rarely appear without a reason. The very fact that we stand here means destiny has placed us upon the precipice of—" "Your tab is overdue," the bartender interrupted. "I don't even have a tab," Wyll protested. "You do now," the bartender said. Vesta raised her hand hesitantly. Sorry, does anyone else see the health bar floating above his head?" Everyone stared at her. "No?" she said weakly. "Right. Forget I said anything." Shadowheart pinched the bridge of her nose. "One of these days she's going to say something and I am going to understand it. And that will be the day I finally lose my sanity." Lae'zel eyed the bartender suspiciously. If this tavern is alive, then slaying it will surely grant experience. Perhaps it will even drop loot. The bartender's eyes, knobs, swiveled toward her. Attempted assault of establishment property will result in mandatory ejection through the window. The nearest window groaned ominously as if warming up. "Fascinating," Gale whispered. "It possesses not only sapience but also rudimentary customer service protocols." "I hate it here," Astarion said flatly. "And yet, Somehow I'm also curious what the wine list looks like. Withers closed his notebook. This will end poorly, he announced, and sat down at a table as though reserving front-row seats to the disaster. And indeed it would end poorly. For the tavern was not simply a tavern, it was a misfiled reality, a paradox written into the universe's ledgers. And the moment Vesta ordered something with caffeine, maybe a latte if you've got almond milk, the entire room shuddered. Because the tavern impossibly knew exactly what she meant, and it was prepared to deliver. Chapter 3, in which beverages are served and laws of physics are ignored. The drinks arrived with alarming efficiency. Karlach's mug was the size of a bucket and fizzed like it wanted to pick a fight. Gale's goblet steamed ominously, which he assured everyone was a desirable property in certain vintages. Shadowheart's glass contained something black, viscous, and entirely without reflection. Her favourite. Wyll's cup glowed faintly heroic, though the taste was suspiciously bland. Lae'zel received a shot glass filled with liquid so sharp it burned a hole in the table. Astarion naturally swirled his crimson goblet with disdain. It tastes like despair, dirt, and cheap curtains, he sniffed. So, yes, I suppose it's authentic. Vesta looked down at her drink. It was a paper cup. A disposable paper cup, with a lid, and a little cardboard sleeve around it. In large letters, the words pumpkin spice latte floated above the foam like a glowing quest marker. Oh no, she whispered. Oh no, what? Karlach asked, leaning over. Looks tasty. I shouldn't have ordered this, Vesta said. Look, it's not even supposed to exist here. Lae'zel squinted. What is a pumpkin spice? Is it a weapon? No, Vesta muttered. It's worse. The tavern shook slightly as though it too understood the gravity of introducing seasonal beverages into a medieval economy. Management, the bartender, leaned across the bar, his sawdust beard shedding faintly onto the counter. Every drink has a price, he said. Right, 2 coppers, you said that already, Karlach said. Not that price. The bartender's knob eyes swiveled toward Vesta. The latte is flagged. Cross-reality item. Paperwork is required. Gale's quill scratched furiously. Fascinating. A beverage so anomalous it requires metaphysical bureaucracy. Tell me more. The bartender slid a sheaf of papers onto the bar with a sound like collapsing timber. The stack was at least 6 inches tall. At the top it read, Form 37. B. Request for anachronistic beverage dispensation. Wyll cleared his throat nobly. At last. A quest worthy of heroes, Astarion groaned. We're about to waste our time chasing stamps and signatures, aren't we? Yes, the bartender said. You will require the signatures of the Duke of Paperwork, the Abyssal Clerk of Lost Things, and a witness who has tasted a pumpkin. Done, Karlach said brightly. I've eaten a pumpkin before. The bartender's eyes clicked. A signed affidavit, please. Shadowheart downed her black drink in one gulp. I hate this party. Vesta sipped her latte. It was delicious, and also tasted faintly of impending cosmic collapse. Withers shut his notebook with a definitive snap. The audit begins. And somewhere deep in the tangled filing cabinets of existence, a bell rang. Chapter 4. The Quest for Form. 37. B. Heroes are used to quests. They expect dragons, dungeons, maybe a cursed crown or 2. What they do not expect is a form. Form 37B to be exact. It had 7 sections, 19 subclauses, and 1 checkbox at the bottom labelled. Do you acknowledge that by completing this form, you may be held responsible for the collapse of up to 3 minor realities Y or N? Vesta stared at it. This feels like when you click I agree to the terms and conditions without reading them, and then suddenly your phone starts speaking Latin at you. What is a phone? Lae'zel demanded. Exactly, Vesta muttered. The bartender management repeated his instructions in the same tone one might use for ordering turnips. To validate the latte, you must obtain the signatures of 3 authorities. First, the Duke of Paperwork, who resides in the bureaucratic wastes. Second, the abyssal clerk of lost things, who can be found only when not being looked for. Third, any witness who has tasted a pumpkin, provided they file their affidavit in triplicate. Sounds simple enough, Karlach said cheerfully. We go, we get the scribbles, we come back, we drink more. Simple, Astarion scoffed. This reeks of tedium. Forms, stamps, filing cabinets. I didn't claw my way out of centuries of vampiric servitude to spend eternity as a glorified errand boy. You do errands for me constantly, Gale reminded him. That's different, Astarion snapped. You have cheekbones. Wyll drew his sword and lifted it high, as though the tavern needed reminding it was in the presence of nobility. Then we shall venture forth to the bureaucratic wastes. No one ventures forth to the bureaucratic wastes, Shadowheart muttered. One shuffles reluctantly, clutching paperwork and muttering about deadlines. The bartender reached under the bar, literally, his chest creaked open like a filing drawer, and handed them a map. The map was unfortunately a flowchart. Gale beamed. Oh, how delightfully logical. Karlach peered at it. What does C Appendix C mean? It means, Vesta said, groaning, we're about to go on the most boring quest of our lives, which means, statistically speaking, it will turn into the most dangerous. Withers snapped his notebook shut again. And thus they go, willingly, into the paper labyrinth. A moment of silence passed. Then the tavern door opened on its own, revealing a long grey hallway lined with filing cabinets that stretched into infinity. The air smelled of ink, dust, and despair. After you, Astarion said, bowing with mock grace. Ladies, gentlemen, anomalies. He gestured to Vesta. Vesta adjusted her cloak. Okay, fine. But just so everyone knows, if a paperclip attacks me, I'm rage-quitting. And so the Fellowship stepped forward, leaving the Probable Duck behind and into the bureaucratic wastes. The first stop on their absolutely not glorious, entirely petty quest to validate a latte. Chapter 5. The Bureaucratic Wastes, now with added ink smudges. The bureaucratic wastes were not so much a place as a threat. It began with a corridor. The corridor led to a room. The room led to another corridor. Each was lined with filing cabinets so tall they disappeared into a ceiling no one could quite see, though you could occasionally hear the faint scurrying of archivist bats, creatures who subsisted entirely on misplaced memos.
Definition: archivist bat, small winged mammal found in bureaucratic environments. Echo, locates via size of middle management. Known to hoard staplers and squeak plaintively when denied coffee breaks.
The floor was covered in paperwork, thousands of sheets drifting endlessly like snow, only sharper and much more likely to cause paper cuts of cosmic significance. Paperwork, Gale whispered reverently as though standing in a holy cathedral. So much paperwork, Shadowheart groaned. I hate this already. Wyll pressed on, posture noble, boots squeaking against unsigned affidavits. Fear not, friends, for we shall cut through red tape with the blade of righteousness. He tripped on a loose form and face-planted into a stack of subsection 14T addendums. Karlach roared with laughter and hauled him out with one hand. Careful, hero! You'll get buried alive under clauses. Astarion wrinkled his nose. Honestly, I can smell the bureaucracy. It smells like damp ink and wasted ambition. Vesta bent down, picking up a form. Wait, this one just says, press any key to continue. The form beeped. Everyone stared at her. She said. Sorry. Cat walked on my keyboard again. Lae'zel drew her sword immediately. Show me this cat. I will slay it. No, no. Vesta waved her hands. It's not here. It's never mind. The ground rumbled ominously. A vast desk loomed out of the misty paperwork ahead. Sitting behind it was a man so tall and thin he looked like someone had stretched a clerk over a lamppost. His robes were covered in stamps, his crown was a ring-binder, his sceptre was a fountain pen. The Duke of Paperwork, Gale breathed, awed. The Duke lifted his gaze. His eyes were tiny ink blots, his expression one of eternal irritation. "Take a number," he boomed. A slot opened in the air, dispensing a slip of parchment. It read, "Now serving number 4. You are 72,619. A silence followed. "How long will this take?" Karlach asked. "With cosmic bureaucracy?" Withers intoned. "Forever."
On time in the bureaucratic wastes, time is elastic here. 1 minute can last several decades, depending on queue length, ink shortages, and whether the Duke has had lunch. Lunch is important. It involves chewing on small petitions until they stop screaming.
Astarion crossed his arms. "Right. I vote we cheat. Gale, teleport us forward. Or Vesta, do whatever it is you do. Glitch reality until this number nonsense goes away." "I don't glitch reality," Vesta protested weakly. "That just happens sometimes." The slip of parchment in her hand flickered. It now read, "Now serving 72,619. You are next." Everyone stared at her. Withers tilted his skull knowingly. "Ah." The audit grows impatient. The Duke of Paperwork leaned forward, stamping the desk with his massive pen scepter. "Next!" And just like that, they were ushered into the presence of the most dangerous weapon of all. A rubber stamp. Chapter 6. The Duke of Paperwork. Rubber Stamp of Doom. The Duke of Paperwork regarded them from behind his monumental desk. It was not so much a desk as a continent with drawers. Whole civilizations could have lived, died, and filed their tax returns on that desktop. He tapped his scepter, a pen so large it could only be wielded by someone with wrists of reinforced bureaucracy, against the blotter. "State your request." Karlach stepped forward eagerly. "We need your signature on Form 37B. The Duke's eyes, twin ink blots, narrowed. "Form 37B, the anachronistic beverage dispensation?" "That's the one," Vesta said, lifting the paper sheepishly. The Duke snorted. It sounded like an ink cartridge running dry. "Foolish mortals, do you know the power of a form, duly signed?"
The power of a signature. A signature is not merely ink, it is consent crystallized, authority incarnate, bureaucracy given form. Entire wars have been started by a single flourish of a quill. Entire realities have been erased by the wrong initials in the wrong box. There are very few forces more dangerous than a rubber stamp, and even fewer more stubborn.
"Ah," Vesta said. "So, is that a yes?" The Duke leaned back, his chair squealing like the tortured soul of an accountant. "Many have come seeking my rubber stamp. Few have left unscathed." A massive rubber stamp was brought forth by 2 filing clerks. It was carved from dark wood, its handle gleaming with the sheen of 1,000 ink pads. Runes glowed faintly along its base. It hummed with the suppressed power of 1,000 approved invoices. Everyone instinctively stepped back. "Is it enchanted?" Wyll asked nervously. "Enchanted? No. It is worse. It is official." Gale clutched his notebook, quivering with excitement. An artifact of pure administration. Why, with this, one could validate or invalidate entire cosmic constants. A single thump could redefine gravity as a filing error. Karlach squinted. "Looks like something you'd find on a secretary's desk." "Ah," Astarion said smugly, "which makes it the most dangerous object here. Have you ever tried arguing with a secretary?" The Duke lifted the stamp. The ground shook. Somewhere deep in the distance, a clerk shouted, "Next!" and several hundred realities ticked forward in the cosmic queue. "You may have your signature," the Duke intoned, "but first, you must prove your worthiness. You must." Everyone held their breath. "Fill out Form 72C." A drawer opened, belching out a document 3 feet long and covered in boxes labelled "Signature of Applicant," "Signature of Witness," "Signature of Witness's Witness," and, "If you are still filling this out, sign again here." Shadowheart groaned audibly. "This is hell." Vesta reached for the form. The ink shimmered strangely in her hands. For a moment she saw a cursor blinking at the top, waiting for input. Her hand twitched like it was reaching for a keyboard that wasn't there. And then, with a flash, the entire form filled itself in. Perfectly, flawlessly, every box checked, every line signed. She blinked. I think I auto-filled it. The Duke's inkblot eyes went wide. Impossible. Nobody completes 72C in less than 6 eternities. Withers tilted his skull knowingly. And yet. The Duke leaned back, clearly shaken. Then, slowly, reverently, he lifted the rubber stamp of doom. Thump. The sound rang out like a bell of inevitability. The form glowed. Section by section, it sealed itself with cosmic finality. The Duke shoved it back toward them. It is done. Form 37B is now, officially, in progress. Vesta blinked. Wait, in progress? Yes, the Duke said, smug again. You still require 2 more signatures. The ground shifted. A drawer opened behind them, revealing a dark, spiralling staircase made entirely of misplaced filing cabinets. The abyssal clerk of lost things awaits, the Duke said ominously. Take a number. A slip of parchment appeared in Vesta's hand. It read, Now serving, error 404. Chapter 7. The Abyssal Clerk of Lost Things. The staircase descended forever, or possibly 5 minutes. It was difficult to tell in the bureaucratic wastes, where time was measured in paperwork completed rather than seconds. At the bottom lay an office. Offices are not generally terrifying places, unless you count those with motivational posters. This one was worse. Its walls were made of drawers that opened and closed on their own, swallowing objects with greedy snaps. Its floor was covered in socks. Not pairs of socks, but single socks, each unloved and mysteriously damp. In the centre sat a desk, empty. Where's the clerk? Karlach asked, scratching her head. She is here, Withers said calmly. We simply cannot perceive her. To see the clerk is to ensure she isn't there. Lovely, Astarion muttered. An auditor who plays hide-and-seek. What next? A tax return that tells jokes?
Lost and found. Every world has a department of lost and found. It is where umbrellas, pens, odd socks, small pets, and occasionally grandparents go when misplaced. The abyssal clerk of lost things is in charge of this department across all realities. This would be an impressive job if she could ever be located, but by definition she cannot. Thus, the position remains permanently filled and simultaneously vacant, which is very cost-efficient for management.
Wyll cleared his throat and spoke boldly to the empty air. We seek your signature, noble clerk. The desk groaned. Papers shuffled. Somewhere a stapler laughed darkly. Lae'zel frowned. She is not here. Yes, she is, Vesta said suddenly. Everyone turned. How do you know? Shadowheart asked. Because my mouse just disappeared. Your what? Vesta held up her hands. You don't see it, but I had a mouse. A little plastic one. With buttons. I was just holding it, and now it's gone. That's how I know she's here. Karlach peered suspiciously at the floor. Like, a pet mouse? No. A computer mouse? You know, with oh, never mind. The desk shifted again. A faint sigh whispered through the room. On the blotter appeared a slip of paper labelled Lost Item Claim Form. A quill hovered beside it, dripping ink. Gale leaned over eagerly. Ah, a test of metaphysical retrieval. Clearly, if we claim a lost item, we gain the clerk's attention. Vesta took the quill. Without thinking, she scribbled, My left slipper. The paper vanished instantly. A moment later, a single battered slipper thunked onto the desk. Karlach gasped. That's my slipper. I thought I left it back at the fortress. See, Vesta said. She's here. You just can't look directly at her. The desk groaned again. A second form appeared. This one read, Authorization for signature of Form 37, B, Lost Things Division. At the bottom was a line, already signed in invisible ink. The parchment shimmered, then merged with Form 37B in Vesta's hands. Withers gave a satisfied nod. And so, the second seal is affixed. "Brilliant," Gale said. "2 signatures down, 1 to go." "Finally," Astarion muttered. "Progress. Now, where's the exit? Please don't say it's through another pile of socks." The desk shifted again. A drawer slid open on the far wall. Beyond it lay a sunlit meadow, impossibly bright after so much ink and shadow. Wyll drew his blade nobly. "Onward, then!" The third signatory awaits. The clerk's voice finally spoke, faint and wistful, from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Do not forget, the last witness must be pumpkin-tested." The meadow shimmered with orange. Fields of pumpkins stretched endlessly into the horizon. Vesta clutched her latte nervously. Oh no. This is going to get seasonal. Chapter 9. The Corn Maze of Caffeination. The corn maze loomed ahead, its stalks impossibly tall, its paths winding and nonsensical. A mist of cinnamon and nutmeg clung to the air, stinging the eyes and the nostrils. Somewhere deep inside, a milk frother hissed with the menace of a sleeping dragon. The party stepped cautiously into the labyrinth. Instantly the paths shifted behind them, sealing off the exit. "Of course," Astarion muttered. "It's alive. It's always alive. Why can't anything just be corn?"
Corn mazes. Corn mazes were invented by farmers who realized their crop could double as entertainment, terror, and an efficient way to lose visiting relatives. In the bureaucratic wastes, however, corn mazes are not entertainment. They are punishments. The walls shift, the signs lie, and somewhere, always, lurks a knight with too much foam in his cup.
Karlach squinted. "Do you hear that?" The hiss grew louder. Then, from the mist, a figure emerged, armor gleaming, shield polished, sword in one hand, and a steaming latte in the other. "Behold," the knight boomed, "a true beverage, perfected with frothed milk and artistry of foam." He angled his cup so they could all see a perfectly drawn swan in the froth. Lae'zel spat. "This is heresy! A warrior should not waste time painting birds in soup." "It's coffee," the knight snapped. "And you dare call it soup?" A second knight appeared behind him. His latte bore the foam image of a dragon. A third emerged, with a heart. Then a fourth, with something that might have been a snail, but was clearly supposed to be a rose. The latte knights had gathered. Wyll stepped forward nobly. "Brave knights! We seek only the pumpkin spice scepter," the knights hissed. One dropped his cup in shock, spilling foam across the dirt. "Blasphemy! The scepter is sacred. No uninitiated palate may claim it." "Okay, look," Vesta said, rubbing her temples. "Where I come from, pumpkin spice lattes are everywhere. Grocery stores, gas stations, bookshops, dog groomers." "Dogs drink them too?" Karlach gasped, delighted. "No," Vesta said quickly. "Well, maybe. Point is, this isn't sacred. It's just seasonal marketing gone feral." The latte knights gasped as though she had cursed their ancestors. Foam hissed angrily. The corn rustled. Gale pushed his glasses up his nose. "Perhaps, my good knights, we could settle this with a contest. An exhibition of skill, artistry, and taste." "No," Shadowheart interrupted, already tired. "They're going to make us fight. They always make us fight." Sure enough, the lead knight raised his sword latte combination high. "To prove yourselves worthy of the pumpkin spice scepter, you must defeat us in ritual combat." The hiss of frothers rose to a deafening pitch. Foam sprayed across the battlefield like mist on the sea. Astarion sighed, drawing his dagger. "I cannot believe I'm about to be stabbed to death by a man holding a cappuccino." Withers closed his notebook with finality. "The froth will fall. And so will many of you." The knights charged, and the battle of foam began. Chapter 10. The Froth Wars. The first knight swung his latte like a mace, the hot foam scattering in a glittering arc. Gale raised a magical shield just in time, though it now dripped with cinnamon and steamed like a teapot. Karlach roared with delight, charging forward with a pumpkin under one arm like a makeshift shield. She smashed into a knight, splattering foam everywhere. Ha! Your swan art looks more like a chicken now.
On foam art, or latte art, originated when one very bored barista realized milk could double as a paint medium. Entire guilds were formed, duels were fought, and at least 3 marriages dissolved over whether the blob in a cup was a heart or a frog. Today, latte art survives, mostly to confuse customers who only wanted caffeine and now feel guilty drinking something that took 5 minutes and 2 existential crises to create.
Lae'zel engaged another knight, clashing steel on steel. The knight countered by flicking his wrist, revealing a second blade hidden in his latte cup's cardboard sleeve. "You dishonor your brew," she bellowed, parrying. "Real warriors drink their coffee black." Astarion darted between them, slicing through a knight's frother hose. The machine sputtered, spraying hot milk everywhere. He flicked it off his cloak with disgust. "Honestly, this is the least dignified fight I've ever been in, and I once got stabbed with a baguette." Wyll, meanwhile, was dueling the leader, who balanced his latte cup elegantly, even as he swung his sword. Wyll gave a noble cry and knocked the cup free, spilling a perfect foam dragon across the dirt. The knight screamed in anguish. "You monster! Do you know how long that took?" "Not as long," Wyll replied gravely, "as it will take you to clean this stain." The crowd of knights gasped. Foam hissed. One fainted into his cappuccino. Vesta, standing awkwardly in the middle, raised her hands. "Wait, look, this is all ridiculous. Pumpkin spice isn't sacred, it's just cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, and sugar in a trench coat." Everything froze. The knights stared. Even the corn stilled. "What?" one whispered. Vesta blinked. "Yeah, that's all pumpkin spice is. It's not even pumpkin." The knights dropped their weapons in horror. "Blasphemy!" "No, really," Vesta insisted. "It's just spices. No pumpkin at all. The whole thing is a marketing scam." One knight fell to his knees, screaming at the sky. Another tore off his helm, muttering, "My entire life is a lie." The leader staggered back, foam dripping from his sword. "Not pumpkin." "Never. Pumpkin." The battle was over. Withers snapped his notebook shut. And thus, the froth wars end in revelation, not ruin. From the heart of the maze, the ground rumbled. A pedestal rose, bearing the pumpkin spice scepter, a tall rod carved of cinnamon bark, topped with a steaming gourd that emitted the faint smell of regret. The pumpkin witness's voice echoed across the fields. "Claim it, and my signature is yours." Vesta reached out. Her hand hovered over the scepter. It pulsed like a heartbeat or possibly like a milk steamer. She grasped it. Immediately reality burped. The corn maze folded in on itself like a badly made paper fan. And the whole party tumbled out into the pumpkin field again, where the pumpkin witness smiled, holding form 37B. It pressed its leafy signature onto the page. The form glowed, sealed with finality, all 3 signatures complete. "Congratulations," the pumpkin witness said brightly. "Your beverage is now fully validated." Everyone turned to Vesta. She held up her paper cup. The latte inside swirled with impossible energy, glowing faintly golden. Shadowheart groaned. "All this for a drink." Astarion pinched the bridge of his nose. "We've toppled civilizations for less, I suppose." Gale was scribbling furiously. "Remarkable! The metaphysical implications of a properly notarized latte." Wyll raised his blade triumphantly. "Another quest complete." Withers, however, leaned forward and whispered, just loud enough for Vesta to hear, "The audit will not be satisfied." The latte in her hand trembled, and somewhere far above in the offices of Cosmic Authority, a red stamp marked her file. Anomaly. Escalate to review. The universe, like any large organization, requires oversight. Not good oversight or even useful oversight, but oversight nonetheless. And so it invented auditors. Auditors are not gods. They do not create, nor do they destroy. They simply check. They check lists. They check boxes. They check rules. If the universe were to collapse in fire and chaos tomorrow, an auditor would be there, quietly noting on a clipboard. Reason: insufficient filing. Tick box: a 17.
The nature of auditors. An auditor is a being of pure order. They have no faces, no emotions, and no patience for anything that cannot be quantified. They find joy only in the absence of joy, which is to say, inefficiency. They are the natural enemies of adventurers, chaos, and, above all, fun.
When something doesn't fit into the cosmic system, say, a tavern that shouldn't exist, a pumpkin witness, or a latte validated across dimensions, the auditors arrive. They do not fix the anomaly. They observe it, record it, and eventually, if sufficiently annoyed, erase it. Which is why it was such a very bad sign that Form 37B had just been stamped Anomaly. Escalate to review. Chapter 11. The Auditors Arrive. The sky split with silence. Not thunder, not lightning. Silence. The kind of silence you find in tax offices after closing, heavy with unprocessed paperwork. Figures descended. Tall, grey, faceless, each carrying a clipboard and a pen that gleamed like a guillotine. They walked through the pumpkin field without disturbing a leaf, and wherever they stepped, colour drained away. "Uh-oh," Karlach muttered. "These guys don't look like they want a drink." The lead auditor raised its clipboard. Its voice was like chalk on slate. Anomaly detected. Subject: Vesta. Status: non-compliant. Probability of existence: erratic. Shadowheart scowled. At least they're direct. Unlike someone I know, she glanced at Astarion. "I'm charmingly evasive," he corrected. The auditor continued, ignoring them. Recommendation: erase. Subject. The party instantly drew weapons. Gale's hands blazed with fire, Lae'zel's blade gleamed, Karlach cracked her knuckles, and Wyll struck a heroic pose that would have been more impressive if he hadn't been standing in a pumpkin patch. "Right," Astarion said. "Usual plan, then? We stab the problem until it goes away?" "Yes," Lae'zel growled. The party charged. Their blades and spells hit like a storm. Sparks, fire, fury, and pumpkin guts flew everywhere, but the auditors did not flinch. Their clipboards absorbed every strike, every spell. Fire fizzled into forms, blades turned into filing errors. Even Karlach's punches turned into minor amendments. "Force is inefficient," the lead auditor droned. "Please take a number." The number slip appeared in Wyll's hand. It read, "Now serving." "Infinity," the party groaned. "We're not getting out of this by fighting," Shadowheart snapped. "We always get out of it by fighting," Karlach protested. Vesta stood frozen. Her latte was glowing brighter, pulsing in time with the auditor's clipboards. She felt a strange tug, like her hands wanted to press buttons that weren't there, like the air itself had a menu she could click. The auditors raised their pens in unison. Commencing erasure. The party braced. Then Vesta shouted, without knowing why, "ESC." The world froze. The auditors stopped mid-motion. The pumpkin patch dimmed. The party hung like statues in the air. Only Vesta moved. She stared at her hands. "What the hell?" Withers turned his skull toward her. Unlike the others, he was still moving. His empty sockets glowed faintly. "At last," he rasped. "You begin to see the strings." Vesta swallowed hard. She looked at the frozen auditors, at her glowing latte, at her friends locked mid-swing. "Okay," she whispered. "Guess it's up to me." Chapter 12. Vesta versus the audit. The world was paused. Not stopped exactly, but paused, as though someone had pressed the universe's big glowing button marked, "Wait here while I get a snack." Vesta looked down at her latte. The foam had frozen mid-swirl, glowing with golden light. On its surface, faint text shimmered.
Options, continue, save game, quit to main menu, settings.
"Oh no," Vesta whispered. "Oh yes," Withers said. She glanced at him sharply. "You knew about this?" I suspected, Withers replied. The way you spoke, the way you acted, as if you were tethered elsewhere. You are not bound to this weave as the others are. You are played. Vesta's stomach sank. So I'm… What? A character in some kind of game? Withers tilted his skull. Labels matter less than strings. But yes, she stared at the glowing menu. Continue. Save quit. Her fingers itched, and for the first time she understood that itch, the sense of invisible keys beneath her fingertips, a ghostly mouse clicking somewhere far away. The auditors hung frozen mid-strike, clipboards raised. Her companions were statues, Karlach's grin frozen mid-battle, Gale's fire suspended in the air like fireworks, Astarion looking stylish even in stasis, which was infuriating. Vesta clenched her jaw. All right, auditors, let's see how you like this, she pointed at the menu. Settings. The pumpkin field dissolved into a grey screen filled with sliders, toggles and checkboxes. Text swam in midair.
Graphics, reality, on-off. Difficulty, heroic/absurd/tax audit. Enable latte mode, X. Delete character.
Her breath caught at that last one. Delete character. It pulsed faintly, like a warning, like an option someone else might choose for her. Nope, she muttered. Not today. She scrolled through, fumbling with invisible controls. The auditors flickered, momentarily unpaused, then froze again. One of them tilted its clipboard, almost as if trying to peer over her shoulder. Don't you dare, she hissed.
New option unlocked. Override audit, Y/N.
Vesta blinked. That's it? That's the cheat code? Withers's hollow sockets glowed faintly. The audit exists to remove you, but you, Anomaly, can remove the audit. Vesta hesitated. If she hit, yes, what would happen? Would her world collapse? Would she blink out of existence? Would her friends even know what she'd done? She glanced at them. Karlach, loyal and laughing even mid-brawl. Gale, dramatic and brilliant. Shadowheart, eternally exasperated but steadfast. Lae'zel, ready to fight the universe itself. Wyll, noble even in pumpkins. Astarion, stylishly annoyed. And Withers, who maybe knew too much. Her found family. She pressed Y. The auditors unravelled, their clipboards shredded into strings of code and paper, fluttering away like moths. Their faceless forms blurred, then snapped out of existence with the quiet disappointment of a cancelled meeting. The pumpkin field snapped back to life. Her friends surged forward, finishing motions they hadn't realised were paused. The latte in her hand settled, golden glow dimming into ordinary foam. The auditors were gone. Ha! Karlach cheered. We won! No, Gale frowned. I didn't even cast my final spell. Don't question it, Astarion said. We're alive. That's what matters. But Vesta stood very still. She could still see the faint outline of the menu in the air, flickering before fading. Withers leaned close. You chose well, Anomaly. But remember, once you know the strings, you can never unsee them. Vesta's hands trembled. She muttered too softly for the others to hear. God, what if I am just a character? Her latte whispered back, faintly, impossibly. Press any key to continue. Chapter 13. Back at the Probable Duck. The Probable Duck was exactly where they'd left it, squatting impossibly at the crossroads, defying maps, probability, and good taste in tavern names. The party stumbled back through its crooked door, battered and pumpkin-stained but triumphant. The tavern roared its approval, mugs clinked, the bard massacred 3 chords in celebration, and management, the wooden bartender, creaked. Welcome back. Please file receipts for quest expenses. Karlach dropped her pumpkin shield on the bar with a grin. Put it on my tab, Shadowheart sighed. She actually has a tab here. Of course she does. The others collapsed into chairs, already ordering drinks. Astarion demanded something redder. Gale launched into a long-winded explanation of pumpkin-based metaphysics. Wyll tried to turn the whole thing into a ballad, and Lae'zel muttered about dishonourable vegetable combat. Only Vesta stayed quiet. She held her latte, now cool and ordinary, staring into the foam as if it might still whisper menus at her. She could feel the itch in her fingers, the knowledge that if she tried, she could pause it all again. She could open the settings. She could change things. It terrified her. She slipped away from the table, moving to a dark corner where Withers was, as always scribbling in his notebook. His skeletal fingers tapped against the parchment as she approached. "Withers," she whispered, "I need to talk to you." He didn't look up. "You already are." She sat down hard. I broke reality out there. I paused everything. I saw menus, settings options. It's like I'm not really here. Like I'm just... Her throat tightened. Just being played. Withers finally lifted his skull. His empty sockets regarded her in silence. "You resurrect the others when they fall," Vesta pressed. "You bring them back, whole, like nothing happened. Can't you do the same for me? Patch me up so I'm normal? So I belong here?" For a long moment, the only sound was the tavern's creaking rafters and the faint squeal of the bard murdering another verse. At last, Withers spoke. "Normal is an illusion, child. The spider believes its web is normal. The fly believes freedom is normal. Both are wrong." "That's not helpful," she snapped. "Neither is normality," Withers replied, unruffled. He closed his notebook and reached into his robes. From within, he drew something that looked like a cross between a bandage, a scroll, and a software update. Strange runes glowed faintly across its surface. "A patch," he said simply, "both metaphorical and physical. It will not erase what you are, but it may help you live with it." Vesta took it in trembling hands. "Will it make me stop glitching?" "No," Withers said, "but it will remind the world to accept your glitches, to stitch them into the weave instead of tearing around them, to make you less conspicuous." She swallowed hard. "And the cost?" Withers' grin widened invisibly in the dark. "Everything has a cost, but yours is simple. You must not run from what you are. You must play your part, even when you know it is played for you." Her hands shook as she pressed the patch against her chest. It sank into her like warm light, humming softly. The itch of invisible keys eased. The menu flickers dimmed to a faint glow, no longer screaming for her attention. She exhaled shakily. "Thank you." Withers nodded. "Thank me later. For now, order another latte. Live, adventure, pretend to be normal, as all mortals do." She laughed weakly. "You really think pretending's enough?" "Child," Withers said, settling back into his chair. "All of reality is pretending." Vesta sat there for a long time, letting the patch hum inside her, letting herself feel almost normal. At the table across the room, Karlach waved her over, grinning. Gale was already standing to deliver another speech. Wyll strummed a lute badly. Astarion rolled his eyes, and Shadowheart had her head in her hands. Almost normal. She smiled and went back to join them. Chapter 14, Slice of Life at the Duck. The Probable Duck had two settings, improbable and very improbable. Tonight it leaned toward the former. The fire crackled, the drinks flowed, and the bard's lute was only moderately out of tune. The companions spread out across their usual table, battered and pumpkin-scented but alive. Karlach was teaching Lae'zel a drinking song. This was not going well. "No, no!" Karlach roared cheerfully, slamming her mug for emphasis. "You've got to sing it, not interrogate it." Lae'zel glared. "I am singing." "Sounds more like you're threatening the beer," Shadowheart muttered into her wine. Meanwhile, Gale had cornered management, the bartender, and was demanding access to the tavern's architectural schematics. "A building that should not exist. It's a metaphysical marvel. Surely you have blueprints." "We have a floor plan," management said, sliding a napkin across the bar. It contained a single rectangle labelled, "Here be tavern." Gale gasped like he'd been handed a lost grimoire. "Brilliant." Wyll was, as always, attempting to tell a story. "And then," he boomed, standing dramatically on his chair. With one mighty strike of valor, the chair tipped. Karlach caught him by the collar mid-fall, laughing so hard she nearly choked on her ale. Astarion reclined in the shadows, sipping something red and swirling it disdainfully. Honestly, you're all embarrassing. If you can't even manage tavern seating without catastrophe. He promptly spilled his drink when Vesta bumped the table. Vesta froze. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw the words "autosave complete" flicker in the air. But then it was gone. Just spilled wine and Astarion's glare. "Apologies," she said quickly. Astarion sniffed. "If you weren't so charmingly awkward, I'd be furious." "Awkward?" she repeated, cheeks flushing. "Delightfully so," he smirked. Shadowheart rolled her eyes so hard it was a miracle they didn't fall out. Vesta laughed nervously and sipped her drink. The patch withers had given her hummed faintly in her chest, steadying her. For now she felt not normal exactly, but close enough. She turned to Withers, who sat silently at the edge of the table, his notebook open. "Do you ever relax?" she asked. Withers didn't look up. "This is me relaxed." Karlach belched loud enough to rattle the rafters. "Ha! See? Even the skeleton's having fun." The bard struck up a jaunty tune. The whole tavern began singing badly along. Mugs clinked, boots stomped, and the improbable tavern felt, for a few precious hours, almost like home. Vesta smiled, letting herself believe it. Just for tonight. Chapter 15. The Tavern Games. Every tavern has games. Dice, cards, darts. Simple ways to separate drunks from their coin. But the Probable Duck did not deal in such trivial amusements. Its games were, naturally, improbable. A large board was wheeled into the common room, covered in spinning cogs, blinking runes, and suspicious scorch marks. Above it, a banner declared, "Tonight, the Great Tavern Games. Winners drink free. Losers become free drinks." "Wait, what?" Vesta muttered. "Management," the bartender slammed his sawdust fist on the bar. "Contestants, choose your event." The list included arm wrestling, against a table that refuses to lose. Drinking contest, winner wakes up first. Magical charades, spells only, no fireballs. Interpretive dance duel. Pumpkin bowling. Karlach clapped her hands so hard the mugs rattled. "Oh yes, we are doing this." "I refuse," Astarion sniffed. "I am above such peasant—" "You're in," Karlach interrupted, physically dragging him toward the sign-up sheet. Lae'zel pointed her sword at the arm wrestling table. "I shall conquer this foe." "The table," Shadowheart said, "has "do not conquer" carved on it." "Lies!" Lae'zel snarled, already squaring off against it. Meanwhile, Gale eagerly signed up for magical charades, muttering, "At last, a chance to demonstrate interpretive transmutation." Wyll, ever noble, chose the drinking contest. "For honour," he declared. "For hangovers," Shadowheart corrected. And Vesta? She somehow ended up enrolled in the interpretive dance duel. She wasn't sure how. Possibly a misclick.
On Tavern Games. The point of Tavern Games is not to win. It is to lose in a memorable fashion. A champion is forgotten by dawn, but the one who set the darts board on fire with an ill-timed sneeze, their name is sung forever.
The games began. Lae'zel strained against the arm wrestling table. The table strained back, muscles bulged, wood groaned, and in the end, the table casually ordered another beer and left her face down in the sawdust. Wyll downed mugs of glowing ale with heroic gusto. The audience cheered. Then he collapsed mid-ballad, snoring nobly. Gale performed magical charades with unnecessary flourish. His attempt to mime Fireball accidentally set the bard's lute alight, which earned him both disqualification and applause. Astarion was entered into pumpkin bowling against his will. He sashayed down the lane, tossed his pumpkin with disdain, and somehow scored a strike. He bowed smugly, pretending it was intentional. And Vesta, poor Vesta, faced off in the dance duel. Her opponent was a half-orc who could spin on his head while juggling tankards. Vesta froze. Then, without meaning to, her body jerked into a bizarre rhythm. It looked to everyone else like she was inventing an entirely new dance. To Vesta, it felt like her player had just pressed random keys. The tavern erupted in cheers. "The Anomaly wins!" management bellowed. Vesta collapsed into her chair, red-faced and panting. "I don't even know what I just did." Withers chuckled softly. "Few do." The night ended in chaos, laughter, and several minor injuries, but the companions were smiling, even Shadowheart begrudgingly. For once, they weren't heroes or anomalies. They were just friends in a tavern. And then the door creaked open again. A cold draft swept in. Clipboards gleamed in the moonlight. The cosmic audit had arrived. Chapter 16. The Audit of Heroes. The tavern grew silent as the auditors filed in. They didn't stride, they didn't stomp. They simply appeared like someone had drawn them in the margins of the page and forgotten to erase them. Their clipboards gleamed, their pens hovered, and their grey, faceless heads tilted with disapproval at the sheer amount of joy in the room. "Subjects, heroes," the lead auditor intoned. "Status, inefficient, commencing review." The companions bristled. Karlach cracked her knuckles. Lae'zel gripped her blade. Wyll stepped forward with noble posture. Gale muttered about academic freedom. Shadowheart just muttered. And Astarion sneered. "I don't care if you erase me, darling, as long as you document how fabulous I looked at the time." The auditor ignored him and flicked its clipboard. Papers fluttered like razor-sharp leaves. Evaluation begins. The first auditor pointed at Gale. Subject, Gale. Review. Verbose, redundant. Spellcasting, output, 73% useful, 27% lecture. "I'll have you know my lectures are invaluable," Gale sputtered. "Note, decrease word count by 50%. Gale went pale. "No, not my words." The next auditor turned to Karlach. Subject, Karlach. Review. High output, low subtlety. Average decibel level. Unacceptable. Karlach blinked. "Wait, are you saying I'm too loud?" "Recommendation. Volume cap installed." "Try it, tin can," Karlach growled, her tail lashing. Another auditor scribbled notes about Lae'zel. Subject, Lae'zel. Review. Efficient at combat, inefficient at everything else. Lae'zel grinned. Correct. Recommendation. All non-combat functions reassigned. Lae'zel stopped grinning. Shadowheart's turn came. Subject, Shadowheart. Review. Sarcasm. Quota. Exceeded. Prayer. Logs. Unfiled. Alignment. Unclear. Good, she muttered. Recommendation. Pending deletion for ambiguity. Her hand twitched toward her dagger. Wyll stood tall as his audit began. Subject, Wyll. Review. Heroic rhetoric. Frequency. Every other sentence. Impact. Low. I object, Wyll declared dramatically. Note, objection recorded. Impact, still low. Astarion's review was scathing. Subject, Astarion. Review, vain, snarky. Contributes 45% of parties' complaints. Function, ambiguous. Oh, please, Astarion sniffed. 45%. I demand a recount. The auditors turned at last to Vesta. Her stomach dropped. The patch hummed weakly in her chest, like a failing lantern. Subject, Vesta, the lead auditor said. Review, anomalous. Behavior patterns, undefined. Output, erratic. Alignment, unknown. Vesta's hands clenched around her mug. She could almost see the menu flickering at the edge of her vision. The patch was holding, for now. Recommendation. Escalate to deletion. The companions surged forward as one. Gale's magic flared. Karlach raised her fists. Lae'zel roared. Wyll shouted nobly. Astarion smirked dangerously, and Shadowheart muttered something unpleasant in prayer. Enough! Vesta shouted. The tavern froze, her voice slicing through the tension. The auditors all turned to her at once, faceless heads tilting. Her heart hammered. The patch hummed louder, but she could feel it straining. If they pushed harder, it would tear. She swallowed. If you want me gone, fine, but leave them out of this. Withers stirred, his skeletal fingers twitching against his notebook. For the first time, he looked almost uneasy. The auditors raised their pens in unison. Recommendation confirmed. Commencing deletion. The patch flickered. The menu ghosted in her vision. Quit. Save delete. Vesta's breath hitched. Not yet. Chapter 17. The break point. The tavern shook as the auditors raised their pens. They did not point them like weapons. They didn't need to. To erase something, all they had to do was write it down. Commencing deletion, the lead auditor intoned. Karlach roared and swung her fist straight into its faceless head. The impact echoed like a gong. The auditor didn't flinch. A note appeared on its clipboard. Karlach. Aggressive. Recommend reduction. Her knuckles burned. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Lae'zel's blade flashed. She brought it down in a strike that had cleaved through dragons. The auditor scribbled calmly. Lae'zel. Over-reliant on blades. Recommend simplification? Her sword turned into a wooden ruler mid-swing. What sorcery? Lae'zel snarled. Gale hurled fire. The flames coiled in brilliant arcs, then fizzled, sucked into the auditor's pen like ink into blotting paper. Gale. Verbose spellcasting. Recommend silence. His mouth snapped shut, literally, like someone had erased his lips. Shadowheart's prayer evaporated before it left her tongue. Shadowheart. Faith unclear. Recommend null. Her holy symbol turned to dust in her palm. Wyll lunged with his sword. It bent like wax in his hands. Wyll, heroic posing. Recommend reassignment to decorative statue. And Astarion. Astarion simply crossed his arms, sneering. Go ahead, darling. I dare you to erase this. The auditor scribbled, Astarion. Excessive snark. Recommend muzzle. A leather strap snapped into being around his mouth. He glared furiously, muffled protests very stylish nonetheless. Vesta stood frozen. The patch hummed frantically in her chest, trying to contain the menu pressing against her vision. Options flickered wildly. Delete. Save continue. ESC. Settings. Her friends struggled uselessly around her, being rewritten into irrelevance line by line, and she was next. Subject. Vesta. Anomalous. Recommendation. Final deletion. The patch burned hot, then tore. She gasped as the world glitched. The tavern walls flickered, pixels bleeding into beams. The bard's song stuttered into static. For a heartbeat, she wasn't in the duck at all. She was looking at a glowing screen, a keyboard under strange hands. Then she snapped back. Withers rose from his seat, skeletal hands trembling on his notebook. It is your choice now, Anomaly. Their strings are bound, but yours are loose. Pull or be cut. Vesta's hands lifted on instinct. Invisible keys hovered in her mind's eye. The auditor's clipboards glowed with lines of text. Lines she could edit. She took a breath. No. The auditors froze. No? She shouted louder. No? You don't get to delete us. You don't get to decide what's efficient or neat or tidy. We're messy. We're ridiculous. We're wrong half the time. But that's life. That's us. Her hand slammed down on an invisible key. Override. Continue. Reality lurched. The clipboards in the auditor's hands shattered like glass. Pens snapped. Faceless heads cracked down the middle, splitting into fragments of paper that fluttered away into ash. The tavern filled with sound again. Karlach roaring, Gale's muffled yelp as his lips reappeared, Astarion ripping the muzzle off with furious dignity. The companions blinked, weapons reforming, faith restored, voices their own again. The auditors were gone. Erased this time not by order but by refusal. Silence fell, broken only by the clatter of mugs falling over in the chaos. Karlach turned to Vesta, eyes wide. Holy hells! What was that? Vesta's knees trembled. I don't know. I just pressed something. Astarion leaned in, lips curling into a sly grin. Well, darling, whatever you pressed, do it again next time. Preferably before they muzzle me. The others laughed shakily, relieved to be alive. Only Withers stayed quiet, staring at Vesta with unreadable sockets. When she caught his gaze, he said softly, "The audit is gone. But the file remains." Her heart sank. The menu still flickered faintly at the edges of her vision. She'd saved them, but the strings were still there. And someone, somewhere, might still be holding the other end. Chapter 18. Aftermath at the Duck. The Probable Duck had survived worse. It had once been hit by a dragon, twice mistaken for a courthouse, and 3 times demolished by its own plumbing. Compared to that, a cosmic audit was just another Tuesday. Still, the place felt shaken. The rafters creaked uneasily. The mugs rattled in the bar. The bard had stopped playing mid-verse, staring at his instrument as though worried it too might sprout a clipboard. The companions, however, were very much alive, which was more than they expected 10 minutes ago. Karlach slapped Vesta on the back so hard she nearly face-planted into her latte. Hell's girl, you saved us. That was incredible. I wouldn't call it incredible, Vesta mumbled. More like pressing random buttons and praying. That's all adventuring is, Karlach said brightly. Astarion was still rubbing his jaw where the auditor's muzzle had been. I will never forgive those creatures for silencing me. My voice is a gift, Shadowheart groaned. A gift we'd all like to return sometimes. Gale, lips newly restored, was speaking at full volume to make up for lost time. Do you realise what just occurred? A mortal, he gestured dramatically at Vesta, intervened directly in the metaphysical fabric of reality itself. A feat of unparalleled. Gale, Shadowheart interrupted. Shut up. He shut up. Briefly. Lae'zel leaned forward, glaring at Vesta. You wield power you do not understand. That makes you dangerous. Welcome to the club, Vesta muttered. Wyll raised his mug in a toast. Dangerous or not, she saved us. To Vesta, the anomaly who stood against the audit. The table cheered, mugs clinking, ale spilling. Vesta forced a smile, lifting her drink with them, but her hand trembled. Later, when the laughter dimmed and the bard resumed his off-key strumming, she slipped away to the corner again. Withers was waiting. You were right, she whispered. The patch, it didn't fix anything. I still see it, the menus, the strings, and I don't know how long I can keep pretending I don't. Withers tilted his skull. You pressed the key. You chose continue. That choice has weight. It will echo. She rubbed her temples. But I don't want to be an anomaly. I want to belong here. I want to be just Vesta, not some character on a string. For a moment, the tavern's firelight flickered across Withers's skull, almost softening its hollowness. Child, he said, mortals spend their whole lives pretending they belong. You simply know you don't. It feels heavier, but it is the same struggle. The trick is not to erase the strings. The trick is to dance on them. She swallowed hard. And if I can't, then, Withers said calmly, you patch again. And again. Until you can. Vesta leaned back, closing her eyes. The menu flickered faintly at the edge of her vision, taunting her with its glowing options. She took a deep breath, ignored it, and listened to her friends laughing across the room. Almost normal. For now. And, somewhere, unseen, a new clipboard turned a page. Chapter 19. Glitch in the Weave. It began small. The tavern's bard started singing the same verse over and over, unable to stop. Patrons ordered drinks, stood, sat, ordered the same drinks again. Gale repeated his last 3 words until Shadowheart threatened to strangle him. Karlach dropped her mug, and it froze in mid-air, beer suspended like amber. Vesta said softly. I think something's wrong. The tavern walls flickered. For a moment, the Probable Duck was a polygonal mess of jagged lines and wireframes. Then it snapped back, only for Astarion to walk through a table without noticing. "Did you see that?" she gasped. "See what?" Astarion asked, then promptly repeated the exact same line. "See what?" Vesta's heart pounded. She turned toward Withers, but he was gone. Only his notebook remained open on the table. On the page were 2 words written in heavy, final strokes. "Restart required." The tavern went black. Chapter 20. The Dream of the User. Vesta floated in darkness. Around her shimmered code, text boxes, error messages, and faint flickers of continue/quit/ settings. She wasn't in Faerun anymore. And then, hands. Not her own. Vast and distant, but tethered to her like puppet strings. Typing, clicking, guiding. "You," Vesta whispered. "You're the one pulling the strings." The air rippled. A voice, not heard but felt, answered. It was the user.
"I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to play the story."
Vesta's chest tightened. "I'm not a story. I'm me. I have friends. I have choices.
You do, and you don't. I make some choices. You make others. We meet in the middle.
The darkness rippled. She saw flashes. Every time she'd said something strange, every glitch, every accidental action, a spilled drink, a cat on a keyboard, her life, doubled and layered. Tears pricked her eyes. "I don't want to be a glitch."
Then don't. You are more than lines of code to me. You're real enough. Real because I care.
The words washed over her. The darkness began to hum, like a great machine rebooting. Text scrolled across the void. "Loading save? Applying patches. Please wait." Vesta reached toward the unseen user. "Will you stay with me?"
Always, until you're ready to walk on your own.
The void shattered. Chapter 21. Continue. Vesta gasped awake at the table in the Probable Duck. Her companions surrounded her, arguing as usual. Karlach laughed too loud. Wyll struck a heroic pose. Gale was already lecturing. Everything was gloriously, infuriatingly normal. The patch in her chest hummed steady and strong. The menu still flickered faintly at the edge of her sight, but softer now, no longer invasive. She smiled. Not gone, but mine. Withers appeared beside her, notebook in hand. "You rebooted," he said calmly. "Yeah," Vesta said, taking a shaky breath, "and I'm still here." He tilted his skull. "Then dance the strings. Anomaly. Dance well." She raised her mug. "To glitches," she said softly. Her friends raised theirs without question, and somewhere, far beyond the weave, a user smiled and pressed continue. Epilogue, in which things tie themselves back together, mostly. The universe, as it turns out, is remarkably good at pretending nothing happened. Whole audits can vanish. Whole taverns can be erased and redrawn. Whole adventuring parties can accidentally validate a latte and destabilize reality without anyone filing the correct report. And yet, life goes on. The Probable Duck continued to sit smugly at a crossroads where no roads met. The bard learned 2 new chords, and ruined both. Karlach drank enough ale to drown a lesser mortal. Lae'zel continued sharpening things that didn't need sharpening, and Astarion maintained his reputation as the most stylish source of complaints in the realms. Gale still lectured. Shadowheart still judged. Wyll still posed. Withers still wrote. And Vesta still glitched. Not always. Not dangerously. Just enough to keep everyone guessing. A wrong word here. A strange gesture there, a suspicion that she knew something they didn't. She never spoke of the strings again. Not to her friends. Not even to herself. Because the world, improbable as it was, had patched itself well enough. For now.
On sequels, adventurers, of course, never stay quiet for long. They always find new taverns, new troubles, new worlds that insist on collapsing inconveniently. And if this particular band of misfits were to stumble beyond Faerun, into stranger lands still, well, the paperwork is already waiting. After all, once you've danced on strings, why stop at one world?